Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jennifer Bober, and I work in marketing and communications for Renew International. And we are very happy to have you with us today for our webinar, Frazzled but Faithful, Parenting Through Pandemic and After. And I want to start us off with a little bit of housekeeping here. This webinar is being recorded, so we will send you an email in a day or two with a link to the recording so you can watch it at your leisure and share that link out with friends and family who you think will get use out of the wonderful information I'm sure we're about to hear. And also during the webinar, please, if you're anything like me, when you think of the question, type it in. I will be monitoring the question box, and when we get to our Q&A towards the end of the interview, we will then, I'll share those questions on with our panelists. So please feel free, as we're going through, type in your questions as you think of them. And today we have with us our own Sister Terry Rickard. She is the President and Executive Director of Renew International. And I'm going to hand things over to Terry and make myself go away and take it away, Sister Terry.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. It's great to be here. We've had a series of webinars at Renew trying to promote faith, renewal of faith in parish life. I'm so happy today that we have my friends here, Dr. Greg Popcak and his lovely wife, Lisa, with us to share their wisdom and their faith as we all try to get through this time as faithful, even though we at times a little bit frazzled. So I'll begin with prayer and then say a little bit more about Greg and Lisa. So in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Good and gracious God, give us the grace to be faithful during this time. Pray that we might be open to the wisdom of Dr. Popcak and Lisa, so that we can, during this time, create homes that are joyful and peaceful, and that the lessons we learn during this time, that we can continue to some of those good practices to continue to enliven our families with the gift of faith. So open us to your wisdom and the wisdom shared here through your Holy Spirit. And we ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. The Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. So without further ado, many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Dr. Greg Popcak and his wonderful wife, Lisa. They are faith-filled Catholics. They're parents, first of all, right? Parents themselves and faith-filled. And I think that's the most important. But they are founders of CatholicCounselors.com. We'll give you a little more info about that that organization at the end. It's a Catholic counseling service. They have a great radio show that I highly recommend, More to Life. So it's again, they talk about parenting issues and they give some very great advice. And they also serve as co-directors of the Peyton Institute for Domestic Church Life. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us, Sister Terry. It's great to be here.
Great. So Frazzled but Faithful. I love that title, Parenting Through the Pandemic and After. So I have some questions for them, but go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, but really, truly, let's all be honest about that. I don't think that anybody has made it through this time to this point without at least a few frazzled moments, because everything, the heat's just been turned up on everything. So I'm so glad we're able to share today and at least say, yeah, we're all in the same predicament, if not exactly the same boat, we're in the same predicament.
Exactly, and all dealing with it different ways. I mean, and during different times of this, different responses. For me, as we almost were coming out of it, I felt a little more anxious. It's like trying to get my breath, So I can imagine, particularly if people have kids running around and financial worries, all those kinds of things, even more difficult. So in light of COVID-19, the closing of schools, economic uncertainty, people have to working at home, right? They don't have the preschool or the nanny or their mom helping out, whatever it might be. So what are some things you're hearing from families? What are some of the challenges and maybe some advice that you could give us?
I think you summed this up so well, Sister Terry, that I practically have nothing to add to it, except that with all those challenges have come anger, worry, a much larger load to carry in terms of responsibility. So a great deal of fatigue, a million questions that they can't answer for themselves, so they're afraid to even try for their kids. This has been a parenting dilemma that you don't have anybody to call and say, how do I do this? What was your experience doing this? Because none of our parents, none of our grandparents ever went through anything quite like this. So it's brand new road, and it brings a lot of feelings with it.
I think that there are two things that we'd recommend to families. First of all, our natural tendency as parents is to want to save our kids from our stress. And not let them have to deal with anything that they don't have to deal with, and that's good. That protective impulse is a good thing. But research actually shows that kids do better when we can find appropriate ways to let them know where we're at emotionally and what we're going through. So, for example, rather if you're having financial problems, rather than just say everything's fine, being able to say, well, we don't have the money to go around like we usually do, but here's, but we're handling it. We have a good budget and we're taking care of things. And let's talk about how we can be a team around that, right? So, if there are certain things that you need from the kids as well, then you include them in that. But being able to let the kids know how it's affecting you and that it's okay to be affected by it is really important, which kind of leads into the second thing, which is, we'll get calls pretty often from parents, not just around this issue, but who are going through any stressful situation. And, they're trying to deal with their stress and the kids are bouncing off the walls and they don't know why.
Well, and it's because kids are a barometer of what's going on inside of us. So we might be saying, we're fine, everything's fine, I can handle this. And even your tiniest child, even a child of a couple of days old, all the way up through to your teenager, is going to, if you'll excuse the euphemism here, going to feel a disturbance in the force, right?
Wow.
And they're going to react to it. So they can get more hyper, they can get more angry, they can get more upset, they can definitely get more needy.
And they act out more. They just naturally act out more. And that's why it's really important to do something that we've been recommending a lot on our radio program, is what we call the family team exercise. So you can break this up however you like. You can do it once a day, or you can even break it down into small segments. So for example, if your daily, for example, when everybody came home and the whole daily schedule was completely overturned, we were recommending that people have a meeting, say in the morning, when you go in and you wake your kids up, maybe you have a little prayer time, give them a little blessing, you cuddle a little bit, and say, okay, guys, you know what? Things are really different right now. What do we need to do to get from breakfast to lunch and feel like we're taking care of each other here? And you just kind of get out whatever your needs are. You talk about what the expectations are for the next 3 hours. You get to lunch and you do it over again. You say grace. You just kind of talk about, we really did a good job handling the last situation, last couple of hours. Maybe we could work on this a little bit more tomorrow. What do we need to do to get to get through to dinner in one piece? How do we take care of each other between now and dinner and break that up? And then again at dinner, what do we need to do to get through to bedtime? Okay. And so you're just being intentional about communicating your needs to each other and talking about how you can be there for each other and be that team. You can do that once a day, or you can just break it up however you need to, in whatever increments work for your family.
And this has to be more than just about what chores are being done by whom. It's not, you've got to get spelling done and this done, and you clean the bathroom and you clean the living room. It has to be, I'm having a hard time today, so I need a different level of noise in the house. If we could all try to be a little bit quieter, if we can all just have
what
some
quiet activities can we do
to
kind of keep down the temperature in the house?
Or we have a lot to get done. So how are we going to work together on if we do need to clean the house today? What can we do? So we're cleaning the living room together. What music should we play? How should we divide it up so we're together and having some fun with this? Then what room are we moving to? How are we going to treat each other during this? So not just checking off the chore list, which so many parents are used to doing, right? Because the school kind of manipulates our day enough where all we have to do is say, okay, this is the homework, we put it in the knapsack. This is different. And the summer, I have to be honest, Sister Terry, this is going to be harder Summer, in some ways, in some places, will be harder because we don't have the fallback to, well, you got to do English here and social studies there and study your spelling words. It's a free-for-all. A lot of places don't have their pools open. There's a place to send your child to camp. Handling it right now may have less structure and pose more challenges. So this is a very important model to follow.
I love this thing about we're kind of all in this together, because often we think, okay, we're the adults or the parents, so we're going to give them the plan. But what you're saying is really engage the kids in creating what that plan is. And I would also say that they have an opportunity to share, right, some of their struggles and
absolutely
disappointments and no baseball. And, I'm thinking about a lot of my grandnieces and nephews, not being with their friends, no baseball. Some places it's starting, but later, and, all those kinds of things they enjoy.
Even that's going to be odd. So for instance, with my 14-year-old, I start back with her next week, taking her to her theater classes, and they're going to be doing theater completely differently. The teachers are going to be facing the mirror instead of them, so they don't have that eye contact. They all have to be in their 6-foot box. They're not allowed to hug and talk and share food together. It's going to be partially great and partially, this is really weird, and it's going to cause more stress. So we have to have that listening ear while helping them to know how to handle the day-to-day by doing something like this.
This is one thing that's really was an insight from a colleague that they shared this with me about what's particularly stressful about this time, is that usually when we're stressed out, we draw closer to each other. But during this time, drawing closer to each other actually is a threat in some ways. I can't go to grandma's and get that hug from her. I can't go to my friends and talk to them the same way. It's the very things that we turn to for comfort, healthy comfort, have been really restricted. And so giving our kids the opportunity to kind of talk about what the hard parts of this are. Another exercise we have besides this family team exercise is something we call roses and thorns. It's not our name, lots of people call it that, but it's basically you talk about the best thing and the worst thing in your day. And when you talk about the worst thing, it's not just you share that, you kind of talk about, well, how can we be there for each other to help each other through that thing? So, if that happens again tomorrow, what can we do to take care of you in that? So everybody kind of talks about the best thing and the worst thing, and then have a little conversation about how you can gather together around that.
You can even do that as we're coming out of isolation too. Just once you've sort of developed this pattern, so it doesn't come out of the clear blue sky. You want this rapport with every member of your family first. But to be able to say, what are the roses and thorns that we experience during isolation? And kind of go through that and say, what do we want to continue? What did we see as those roses during this that we're saying weren't in our life before this, and how do we want to continue this? So if it's we had more time together, we had a slower pace, we took walks whatever that was, that actually was sort of the silver lining or multiple silver linings through this, is something that allows us to not just reset back to the old ways in the next 3 to 6 months, but to really take what we've learned, the blessings, and bring them to reestablishing ourselves in a different way.
It's kind of leading to my second question about, and I think, Greg, you mentioned this in your article in Sunday Visitor. You talked about it's not just about getting back to normal. How do we take, we say at Renew, what are the best practices for parishes, and then how do we promote it? It's like, what's some of the best practices that we experience or we learn from other families, right? You see things people are doing. I started a Zoom hour with some of my friends from high school because I saw someone else doing, and had one with my siblings, So we've learned some good things. So what did you mean, Greg, when you talked about not getting back to normal?
Doing church as usual. Yeah, the article was about, just because we're going back to normal doesn't mean we can do church as usual. I in our experience, for example, we'll get calls from people on our radio program, and we'll ask them, let's say they're having a hard time with their kid around some faith issue, and we'll say, okay, well, talk to me about what kinds of faith things do you do as a family? And we're hoping they're going to say things like family prayer or having conversations about the faith. 9 times out of 10, the answer is, well, we go to church on Sundays, Okay, that's great. That's awesome. And we need to go to church on Sundays. I said, well, what else do you do? Well, they're involved in a youth group. Okay, that's awesome. Youth groups are great. Good. What else do you do in terms of your faith at home? Well, they go to religious education. Okay, that's important. But we've now named 3 things that don't go on at home. But Catholic families tend to think that the faith is something that you have to leave home to do and experience at church. And it's almost like we go to our parish and see it as a vending machine where we get the grace, right? We get all of our supplies at the convenience store or the vending machine, and then that's going to carry us through the week until we can come back to the vending machine again and get more grace. This pandemic, I think, has challenged that assumption about how church works, and really our own theology of church, the Catholic theology of church, teaches that most of the churchy stuff should be happening at home.
Absolutely.
And the parish is supposed to be supporting the domestic church, not the domestic church seeing the parish as the be all and end all. And I'm not saying there's a competition there. We need to work in harmony with that. It's not that the domestic church is better than the parish, but it's that the parish should be empowering parents to bring Jesus home with them, and then to experience the faith as the source of the warmth in the home. And I think a lot of families have gotten a taste of that through this time, but we need to expand on that and help families develop that further.
Well, and when they expand on it and develop it further, then when they do have the opportunity to experience some of those parish programs, that's when it's going to be fertilizer on the soil. Right? That's just a thought I'm having in my head, but I'm going to go with it, even though it's a little weird. A lot of our parish programs, even the beautiful stuff that's done through Renew, it's supposed to be fertilizer to the tilled soil and the seeds we've already planted, right? In our domestic church. What is fertilizer? It's poop and a bunch of chemicals. If we just throw that out there on ground that's not prepared, on a lack of seeds, all it's going to be is like, people are going to go, oh, that doesn't work for me. That kind of stinks. I don't like that program. I'll move on to another program. But if we are tilling the soil for our children and our spouse, if we are celebrating Christ in our home and recognizing him as a person who lives there with us and loves us most and wants to be there.
And planting those seeds of faith, basically. Planting
those seeds of faith, doing things together faith-wise as a family. Then when we go back and the kids are in youth group or we're taking part in a parish program, that just feeds us and things begin to grow. And then we bring that home and we're talking about, what a great night we had learning about this. And everybody goes, oh, okay, well, let's do that at home, or let's talk about that more. And it grows. And I can say that's true because that happened for me as a revert to the church as a teenager. Everything that I learned at church expanded what was happening for me internally and in my home that I was doing. And we can have that flow if we take what we've learned in isolation, or at least what we've desired to have happen in isolation, and then build on it.
I'm thinking about what you said about the roses and the thorns. The sisters I live with at night, when we have dinner, we'll always say, what are you grateful for? So it's, I guess we talk about the roses, and we thank God for that. And it's a way of also us sharing how God has worked in our life. It's very simple. And then we do the traditional blessing of food. But I was thinking, we don't do the thorn, so I'm gonna tell them that tonight. I think we're gonna do the thorn too. But that's a practice. If people did that now, it's very simple. You're sitting around the table, what's something, we say blessing, but that's kind of a nunny word, but you might say, what was something really great that God gave you today in person or experience, and what are you struggling with, and just continue that. I mean, I think that's what you're saying after the pandemic. It's not like you're separating it. You got, okay, now we're going to pray an hour in prayer. It's kind of connected to the dinner, and you have those kind of.
I want to hit on what you just said, Sister Terry, because so many of us think that our domestic churches, our family life, is supposed to mirror what happens in clerical or religious life.
Like a monastery.
So we try to take all of this spirituality that comes from the monastery, the convent, and I know, because we talk to people all over the world, I know families who are trying to do everything they're starting with the morning office, and they go through and they stop for the Angelus. I mean, they try to do a full rosary with 8 kids who are all under the age of 8, and they're like 2-year-olds hanging off the ceiling and babies crying. And why aren't we spiritual enough? They're saying.
Or then you get the other side where people will say, I used to have a great prayer life, and then I got married and had kids. And so the idea actually, like you alluded to, Lisa, most of what we think of as Catholic spirituality is drawn from the more monastic or clerical tradition in the church, and it doesn't tend to fit very neatly into messy family life. With the Second Vatican Council, there was this sort of insight called the universal call to holiness. The idea that holiness wasn't just for the special class of people, but for everybody, including lay people, right? Especially lay people. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that's been done since then to look at what does an authentic family-based spirituality actually look like. So that leaves people feeling a little frustrated because they don't know what to do to be domestic churches and live their faith at home. But going back to your point about, does that mean, okay, well, we have to take an hour a day as a family on our knees to our little, family altar or something? No, I mean, if that works for you, awesome. But no, that's not what you have to do. It's really much more about asking God to walk alongside of you all day as a family. So we like to use the phrase, and I know some religious orders use this too, of active contemplative. The idea that as I'm walking through my day, and I'm just talking to God, and I'm saying, what are you saying to me through this experience, Lord? Okay, I have to change the 300th diaper today. How can I do this in a way that shows your love to my child? And also, what are you saying to me, God, through this experience about your relationship with me?
Well, and being honest with him. Lord, I'm so tired. I got to change this diaper again. Give me a pleasant face to look into my baby's eyes. Help me to see that I am actually, serving you when I change this diaper. Let me show love to my child. Help me get through this in a way I can't do it on my own. Just talking to the Lord. I was listening to a YouTube video the other day. I think it was Father Mike Schmitz. I'm not positive, but I think that's who it was. And he was talking about this idea, just personally saying when he does anything during the day, like if he's going out for a run, he'll say, hey, Jesus, you want to come for a run with me?
Yeah.
And it's that idea, in our family, my godmother, who had 5 kids, and when her husband passed, she actually became an oblate sister. Wow. And she used to teach me that whenever we cooked together, we asked the Blessed Mother Mary to help us make that food as great as she would make it for her son and St. Joseph. And we brought it in. And I pass that down to my kids. And if something goes wrong with that recipe, they're always like, oh, we forgot to pray to Mary. So it's those little things. And it's also having an open heart. So, you were saying sharing the idea of the thorns with your sisters. That's where we go back to that first question about what do we do with all this stress during COVID or during anything. And when we take those little moments to be honest with the rest of our family and say, one of my thorns today was that, I just don't feel great today. I'm really tired. Or I had this meeting that was just really rough. Or, I'm just feeling overwhelmed. Whatever that is, then we can say, well, let's pray for that, and we can, your kids can just at dinner say, Lord, please help mom get through what she's going through. She really needs you right now, and help us to help her. Boom, you're done. You're praying, but Jesus is there. He's always there. Your kids are learning to have that conversation with him. We're learning to draw together as a family. That's domestic spiritual life in a big way.
And I would also say it's not that, Renew, we try to help people to be able to articulate and share their faith. And we do that in small groups. So the family is a small group, right? So
the original group.
The original small group, that's right. So here you are, you're in the family setting, like for us, it's like a 90-minute thing and people are sharing. And so maybe it's just a few minutes before you go to bed and just say, where did you encounter God today in the messiness or the good or the bad? So to be able to teach our children, to be able to share that as a normal life.
That's something that we've always done as a family, but then when isolation hit with COVID, we said, all right, we're making a practice of this. We're writing it down. And so every night we start our family prayer time, and we have this little journal. And my 14-year-old hates this thing because it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's just what I could get. And she keeps saying, I can't wait we're done with this book. I want a prettier book. But she's actually taken charge of it. And we go around in a circle and we say where God showed up for us that day. What particular things, like, yes, we're grateful that we have a home and that we have food, but what particular things did God really bless us with that day? And the reason we're writing it down is twofold. One, it's making us stop and think and be very concrete about it. Two, we know that we're writing a historical document. When we're done with this, when COVID is no longer on this earth, our adult kids, our grandkids will be able to look at this and say, look how God got our family through this. And we can do that all the time. But for right now, it's really been very profound for us to be able to do that and acknowledge God every day together.
But, you know, in addition to the gratitude journal idea, one of the other, we're talking about domestic church, right? So one of the other things that church does is minister, reach out. So another simple question, besides, you know, how did God show up for you today, or how did God bless you today, is how did God use you to be a blessing to somebody, right? And that's a simple way to encourage that sort of missionary spirit, that missionary discipleship, even in the smallest kid. You know, what did you do? How did God use you to be a blessing today? You know, well, I held the door for somebody, or I
helped mommy fold the laundry. You know, it doesn't have to be outside of our house. I played my brother's game instead of the one I wanted to play. But if we can reach out outside the family, then that's one of the things we talk about as a group. What can we do to make other people's lives better today? You know, maybe it's making cards for the elderly who are stuck in a nursing home or senior living situation. And even the tiniest ones can, like, make the little finger paintings, and then mom can fold them in half and make a card and, you know, write it out and tell the child. It's important to connect in that way. Maybe you're making food for a neighbor that just needs something uplifting. Whatever that is, you're getting together as a family to do it. It's not just mom or dad's job to outreach, but together we're saying we have the power to make somebody's life a little bit better.
And that simple question, though, you know, I think we have a tendency to think that missionary discipleship is just for grown-ups. And we don't really expect our kids to be actual disciples. And I think that simple question is a very easy way to train your kid to think, you know what, God wants to use me to be a blessing to somebody today. Let me look for those opportunities to do it, because mom and dad are going to ask me about it later.
And they give them a sense of purpose and mission. And, you know, we always, our material isn't just, okay, we're going to gather, we're going to share on the word, great, but it's always moving people out to mission. So it's not an element of discipleship, it's the heart of discipleship, mission, right? So I think that whole sense of families on a mission, and, you know, it goes back to the thing, you know, to really serve the church or to be on mission, you become a sister or a missionary or a priest. But the truth is, as you said earlier, it's all of our call. We're just living that out. So
well,
that's
it's the domestic church's job, just like the parish church or the ministerial priesthood consecrates the body and blood of Christ. It's the domestic church's job to consecrate the world to Christ. You know, it's our job to go out to our family and our friends and to bring Christ to the world. Because the fact is, there are a ton of people who are never going to darken the door of a church or take part of any church ministry or church charitable services, but they know you. You know, you work with them. They're your brother-in-law. They're, you know, what, and you're going to have an encounter with them, and you need to encounter all those experiences and consecrate them to Christ. And so, you know, this idea of just that simple question, how did God use you to be a blessing today to somebody? It really gets you thinking. I do want to share, there's one other story that I want you to share that talks about just how powerful it is to get kids engaged spiritually. And I want you to tell it's the sort of having kids give you blessings.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was a lot of years ago, but it really changed my kids' spiritual life.
And we've been doing it ever since then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was a pivotal point for me as a mom. My oldest ones were preschooler, kindergarten age. And I was just having one of those mom days, you know, where everything was going wrong. The house was a mess, even though I'd worked on it. The kids were miserable, even though I tried to be loving. Everything was wrong. And I got to dinner time and I was trying to make dinner and the kids were fussing. And I looked out of the window that's above my kitchen sink and I just shot up a prayer at the sky. And I said, Lord, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to lose my mind. You got to come through for me. Blessed Mother, you're a mom. Pray for me. That's all I said. And I just felt this shift in me. And I just kind of had this mental prompting that said, have them pray for you right now. I had
Wow.
never done that before. And I turned off the water, threw the sponge into the sink, and said, kids, come over to the couch. They thought they were in so much trouble. You know, that's it, the lecture is coming. And I just said, guys, I can't. This day has exhausted me. I'm getting really teary. I'm going to start getting angry. I don't want to do this. I need you to pray for me that I can do better right now.
And they were used to us giving them blessings every day, where we would just ask God to give them, touch their hearts with His love and all that. So.
And so I just suddenly felt, a hand on my shoulder, another hand on my knee, like the kids just started to put their hands on me. And I started hearing things like, Lord, please bless mommy, help her to feel better. And then other was like, help us behave better so we don't drive her crazy. And this just peace just washed over me. And we suddenly became a team instead of a us versus me versus them kind of thing. And the momentary blessing of that was huge. The lifetime blessing of that was unbelievable, because in that moment, my kids learned that they could actively pray and see something change immediately. And they had power in God. Wow. And they had the power to pray for a grown-up, more than just please bless grandma, that this was significant. And it changed their own prayer life, because it gave them permission to talk to Jesus out loud with me, to be very real, and to see that immediately what they did by asking God to come into it had an effect. And it really, my two oldest are in their 20s now, and they are still both active, powerful prayer people. And that really started in that moment. So back to like the first question of how do you get through all the stress? How do you get through all the tension and the fear? When you pray together and allow your kids to have that voice with God, and you have that voice with God, He can come in and change everything in your family.
Well, I'd say your vulnerability too. And it goes back to what you first talked about, doing this together and respecting their feelings, that they have coping skills and ways that they can help you and you can help them, and to be honest, right? So that's
point. Yeah, we think, and I think especially now in this time of COVID, we think we have to be so put together for our kids because they need to feel safe. But when they see that we can be vulnerable and that it's really God that's going to be there to give us any virtues we need to get through this, we don't have to muster them up ourselves. It opens up that flow of dialogue and shared feelings and grace, and just so much goes on.
So any other thoughts? I'm thinking in a few minutes, we're gonna have question and answer. So hopefully everybody out there, if you have some great questions for Greg and Lisa, that'd be great. But
even some big questions are fine.
Yeah, any questions?
Okay, questions. But this whole thing of lowering stress, can you give any other kind of, I think particularly there's other stress as this begins to reopen. And the uncertainty, huh? School, they're still talking about, some are saying that they're gonna open school, others are saying maybe not, different parts of the country are in a different place. So there's no clear, I often say, and I've said this to my staff at Renew, we think there was a clear plan, but we're actually never in control, right? This was just so clear, so there are, as we've said earlier, there's lessons to learn. We're never really in control. You never know. And how do you kind of entrust yourself each day to God and kind of go with it? So anyway, what are some things, in terms of stress?
Well, look, so in times of uncertainty, we're, all of us, adults and children, do best when we have ritual and routine in our lives, right? Where we have some kind of order. It doesn't have to be, some kind of schedule printed out in triplicate and filed with the home office, but there has to be some sort of order to our lives. And so one of the things that we recommend as an important domestic church practice is the idea of clarifying what our family rituals are and having a little time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes each, to work, play, talk, and pray together every day. And if you just create those little moments so for example, a working together ritual would be an example of, let's all clear the dishes together. That's, it's fine for kids to have, or all of us to have, certain chores we do individually, but every family should have certain things, work things that they do together to practice teamwork and stewardship. right? Work play. You know, the idea that when we model healthy play as a Christian family in a world where fun is often defined as sin, when we take time every day as a Christian family to just play a little bit, a couple of hands of Uno, shoot some hoops, take a walk around the neighborhood, just be silly with each other. That's teaching an important, healthy Christian relationship with leisure.
And I have to say that the play ritual is something that our clients at Catholic Counselors are really reporting has changed their life during this time of isolation, because it's the first time they have time. You know, they get to some point in the day where everything slows down and they remember, oh, well, we could play a game together. We could do a puzzle together. And it's changed so much. So that's one of those roses to say, when we go back to whatever normal becomes, let's make sure we fit that in every day, that we have some time to hold on to that time together where we just get to enjoy each other.
The talk ritual, so it's work, play, talk, pray. The talk ritual could just be the roses and thorns thing that we touched on, or something similar. The pray ritual, we talked about several different ways to pray together as a family, but making sure to try to touch those points every day, even if it's for 5 minutes each, you know. And the thing about that is it creates a sense of order. You know, so in a monastery, you've got that sort of rule of life, right? You know, but you don't want to replicate that at home. That's just too much. It's too rigid. But when you have a framework like this work, play, talk, pray idea, and you realize we've got to touch on each of those points. And maybe I had one client that I suggested this to, who actually put it on the fridge, and she had her kids kind of write down every day what we did to work, play, talk, and pray together. Kids were like, hey, we didn't pray together today, or hey, we didn't get our time to talk today. And it was really neat to get their buy-in.
Yeah, and they get to be held, you know, they help mom and dad be held accountable to it too. But the lovely thing about the work, talk, play, pray ritual is that it fits any family. It fits any family, because you can be playing and praying with your infant in your arms and your 2-year-old and your 18 other kids, or you can do it just you and your spouse if you're in that empty nest situation, or you can even just do it for yourself if you know you're moving into that time of just living by yourself. Whatever that is, it doesn't matter where you come from, what your ethnicity is, what your financial situation is. It's something everybody can do for themselves, which is, for all the women out there, a great way to not hold yourself in comparison to everybody else, because every mom falls into this. I'm not as holy as Susie down the other end of the pew. I don't do this, and my kids don't have, you know, matching clothes. This
we all dress in liturgical colors all the time. Yeah.
Whatever that is, you know, that you or my kids, you know, aren't holding straight A's, or whatever that is that you feel like you don't hold up. If you've figured out a way to play together every day, talk together every day, work together every day, pray together every day, even for a couple of minutes each one, you know, you've hit the right, unique, and unrepeatable goals for your family. And it just works for everybody.
Great, because it gives people like a framework, but you can do that, adapt to your situation. And the truth is, for all of our spirituality, we need that kind of.
And that rhythm helps to decrease stress, and the connection that comes from those rituals decrease stress too, because it's ultimately relationship and connection with each other and God that take down that emotional temperature.
And at a time right now where things seem to be changing every minute, every time you turn on the news, something has shifted. You all know in your family, I can count on that today. I might not be able to count on, you know, that thing I thought I could do this weekend because all the rules have changed, but I know that I'll be praying with my family, doing a little bit of work together, sharing a little bit together, playing a little bit together. Those things will just happen because we've made a commitment together. So the world might be tilting on its axis around us, but we're holding on to each other by doing that every day.
Yeah, and keeping that kind of, you know what I've noticed when you're saying the silver lining of this, where I live in the convent, we have a big parking lot, and then there's a park right across in a field. So all the parks were closed in New Jersey. So the church parking lot became a place for families to come. And I loved it. You know, I'm a people person. It was driving me crazy being stuck in the house. But I see these, particularly the fathers, out with these kids and doing rollerblading. And they were all doing their social distance. There would be like 5 or 6 family units all over the parking lot doing all sorts of great things and playing together. And you can hear them, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, you know, or they come with their bikes. And I did not see that. I saw the kids come, but not with their parents. So I thought, wow, this is a great blessing and hopefully a practice that people can do when the pandemic ends, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, I
I
think
think we've hit a wonderful point to
there she is.
shift over to questions. Though the first question that did come up, I will answer myself, is that, is there going to be a recording? Yes, we talked about it at the very beginning. There is going to be a recording, and we will email this out to you. And I know that I will be emailing this out to people I know, because this has just been such a pleasure for me to listen to, and have really, really enjoyed this. So please, though, anyone who has any questions, find the question box now, and take advantage of the wonderful insights that we're getting here today, and ask away. I will say, when you were talking about domestic church, and when you're talking about doing the dishes, one of my favorite things about doing the dishes is, one of my friends found out that her mom had the exact same kitchen Madonna that I grew up with, and after her mother passed, she gave it to me. And so when I'm doing my dishes, I'm always thinking of my mom, and her mom Rosie, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful moment, whenever I'm doing the dishes.
Yeah, you never think that doing the dishes can become a memory that's important to your kids,
Or
and
part of a
important
spiritual life.
part of your life. Exactly. But when it becomes part of that ritual and routine every day, and you do it in a way that brings you together rather than you're fighting over whose turn it is, it can change everything. And it's something that your kids will pass on to their kids, kind of thing, because it's a sweet memory instead of intention.
And with games, we learned never play Scrabble with mom, never play cards with grandma.
Yeah.
How about, if we're waiting for a question, is there something else you think that you could help people with, or some other advice you might have given?
So again, going back to this idea of how family spirituality needs to be kind of different than, say, our traditional view of Catholic spirituality. The most important thing really is, and this is all the research. So we had a symposium last year at Notre Dame, where we brought together about 50 theologians, social scientists, pastoral ministry people, and other professionals who are internationally recognized for their work with families. And we were talking about, how could we renew Catholic family life, really? And one of the things the research really showed, there's one guy who's passed on now, but he did a 50-year research project looking at 350 families about what does it take to pass the faith on to the next generation. So this went on for over 50 years. And there were several other studies along those lines that were also presented. And what he found basically was the most important thing is that kids need to experience the faith as the source of the warmth in the home. It's not so much about catechesis. It's not even so much about dragging them to church every week. Obviously we all have to go to church, but it's terms of passing on the faith and helping it connect. The kids really have to see that the faith is making a qualitative difference in the kind of relationship we have in our household compared to my non-faithful friends. Because when I can see that my faith, my family's faith, is making a difference in the way we get along with each other, relate to each other, then that means that it's real. Otherwise, it's just a weird habit that mom and dad like to do. So that's the key.
Well, and I want to add to that, because you're saying obviously we have to go to church. Everything at Mass becomes more meaningful when your children see this going on in your home, including the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Because suddenly someone giving up all of themselves, their very body for you, makes sense when you've seen mom and dad love you so much that they make time for you every day, that they share their feelings with you and let you share your feelings with them. Suddenly, sacrifice isn't something scary or odd or incomprehensible. It's something that you feel in your bones.
And that leads to intimacy.
Yeah, that leads to intimacy. And so, you see the preparation of the altar, and it reminds you of setting the table with your family who you're joking around with every night, and you're getting ready for this meal you're looking forward to, and seeing Christ pour himself out for you. Say, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense, because as a family, we try to give as
Lisa, too, that helping to make those connections for that. Exactly. Because what I find is that we separate faith and life,
Yes.
So even if you go to church every Sunday, it's like, okay, we do that. You cut out after communion and you feel pretty good. At least you did that. better than most people, and then you just go about your life. And that's what we keep trying to do with you, connecting faith and life, and for you particularly in the home. Well,
and so I think, it's important to not think that there's church over here and domestic church over here. It's that we go to church, we receive the precious body and blood, which should change everything, right? We're consecrating ourselves to Christ, and then we bring Jesus home.
Mm-hmm.
We live out that grace in the domestic church, and that sacrificial love that we experienced at Mass becomes the model for the love in the household, which then leads to the faith being the source of the warmth in our home, and then it brings forth all that other fruit of ministry that we're talking about earlier. So it's tied together. It's not that, there's families and there's church. We are in communion with each other, and we feed each other in that way.
And the kids have to see that in your lives. And I would say when we can awaken our faith, through an encounter with Christ, faith becomes part of our everyday life. And then we bring that, right, as Greg said, to church. And then it says, go out and proclaim the gospel with your life, right, in your home. And then you have that mission to your school or your workplace or wherever you find yourself.
So if the motto or the theme or whatever of Mass is "Go, you are sent," mm-hmm. we'd say that the theme of domestic church is "Come and be formed." Right. Okay. So they go, and you go, you are sent, and then you're formed in the domestic church, and then you go back to be fed, and then you're sent back out again, and it grows the body from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That we do have. The first is actually a comment. Paul said he loved how much trust and respect you placed with your children and asking them to pray for adults. That's just wonderful. But then we have Patricia asked a question. What obstacles might parents and children encounter when trying to implement these ideas?
When the most pushback, so the first part of that is you'd be surprised to see how open kids really are to doing this for the most part. Okay, I mean, especially if you're catching them early and doing these things, you're setting a stage for a more authentic, more relational, more personal faith that really appeals to the whole family. When you've kind of fallen into the idea of, faith as just a bunch of rules to follow or a bunch of lessons to memorize, and the kids have kind of gotten to the place where they've just zoned out and they're in the habit of zoning out. Initially, you get some pushback with doing some of this stuff because kids feel like this is the same old, boring, meaningless, impersonal thing. Okay, but if you can get over that hurdle and do the kinds of things we're talking about, even just a couple of times, there's a spark there that they're not used to. And that spark, you'd be surprised. Like again, I'm a therapist, right? So I work with families who are really struggling. So this is not all pie in the sky stuff. I was talking to a family just earlier today, actually, about this prayer ritual that we were trying to get a family prayer ritual to go. And the kids hated the idea. They didn't want to do it. Honestly, the parents and the kids are at war constantly with each other. They finally got their kids to do it. They said it was amazing because at first they were all kind of resistant to it. But then as we started praying the way we were talking about in this session, the kids all really engaged for the first time. They'd never seen their kids actually pray in a meaningful way. And it gave them hope that maybe they could actually work on their relationships too. So, people respond well to authenticity, but they resist, and rightfully so, stuff that seems fake or too rigid or just formulaic. And unfortunately, most of our approach to faith at home tends to be formulaic and rigid and rule-based and that sort of thing. And so this approach is just much more dynamic, and I think it naturally appeals to people if you can get past that initial resistance.
Well, and it also works even if you're all in different places in terms of where you are on your road to faith in God. So if you have a child who's struggling with their faith in God, if you have a spouse who's really not a prayerful person and maybe has given you some resistance because you're so churchy, when you start this idea of working, talking, playing, and praying together in a way that's authentic, even starting with the thorns and roses thing, it's non-threatening. It's not just saying words at God. It's not trying to look very pious. It's, I really want to know your heart and for you to know mine. I really want to spend time with you. I want to make our home more pleasant to be in, warmer to be in. And even somebody who's given you some pushback on your faith before will start to feel that sense of love and that sense of authenticity, as Greg is saying, and they eventually start to melt into it because it's a place where they can find comfort and closeness.
You know, and compare that to going to your spouse who's not church and saying, we were to do this 30-day novena. I mean, there's nothing wrong with 30 days, but you just can't walk up to somebody who has no relationship with God and say, let's do this intensive spiritual practice. It doesn't make any sense to them.
Right.
But what we're talking about here is a much more relational, much more authentic, much more personal way where people start to experience that God is helping us be more real with each other. And really, who can object to that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would say start simple, huh? Just, you know, start simple.
Start simple. There's a lovely writer. She's about 30 years old now. Her name is Sarah Clarkson. And she's a beautiful woman of God. And she writes about beauty and faith. And when people have asked her how she held on to her faith, because she was raised in a very faithful family and took her faith into her adulthood, and people have asked
she
her.
went to Oxford, so you know where it's not very cool to be, faithful. You know.
And so people have asked her, how did you retain your faith throughout your life? And I love her answer, because what it was I think it was the French toast. And people never know what to do with that. And she said, well, every Sunday morning, my mom would make this French toast after church, and we'd sit and we'd talk about, what we heard, and we'd talk about great things. Or every night, my mother would make us cups of tea or hot cocoa, and we'd just sit by candlelight and kind of share our day. And it was so warm. And I always knew that my parents had my heart, and they always gave us Jesus. And so I knew he had my heart, and it just allowed me to grow through that. So it's those domestic church ideas that give us the warmth in our home as the foundation of our faith that really does soften the heart of those in your home to the idea of loving God and being loved by him.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. So one last question, because I know that we're coming close to our time. Diane is asking, have you learned anything new about yourself or your parenting during this stay-at-home time?
That I can cook more meals than I ever thought possible.
I think that's true for me too. Yeah.
I happen to have homeschooled my kids. We're home a lot of the time, but the fact that in this rural town that I live in, I didn't have a chance to order out one meal. I didn't have a chance to go out to a restaurant. The fact that I can persevere with God's love, and that we can enjoy each other even during kind of scary, unusual times when we keep to these rituals and routines, that was all really wonderful to experience in a wow, I can do this sort of way.
And I think the other thing for me was to see how the kids stepped up too in the whole process. Like, so for example, when we were watching Mass on Sunday, I wasn't really looking forward at all to watching Mass on my computer as a family on Sundays, and I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. But it was actually beautiful to actually celebrate Mass at home and do the thing. We were be more casual about it, but we still, we sang the songs and said the prayers, and to see our kids really engage in that without anybody else around them doing it. Well, there was no awkwardness there. They just did it because they wanted it. And it was beautiful to see them sort of stepping up spiritually. And I think it encouraged us to risk going even deeper with them than we might naturally have been inclined to ourselves, because kids really do want that. They want faith. They want God. They want that.
They're created to want God, right? Because they're his children. So that was always and has been amazing to us. And our youngest just kind of choosing, like for the first few weeks, we watched different masses. And then our parish set up cameras in the church and decided to start doing this. And our youngest said, can we just watch our Holy Family Mass every week? Because I feel like I'm home. I want to be with the priest. And so that was a beautiful thing to be able to have that touchstone with our parish, even though we couldn't go there.
Great. Okay.
Wonderful. So before we go, if you would like to hear more from the Popcaks, who, as you can tell from today, have a lot of wonderful insights, you can go to CatholicCounselors.com, and you can also find them on Sirius, part of the EWTN channel 130, and their program is called More to Life. And You can call in, you can send in your questions. And actually, if you go to CatholicCounselors.com, there is a link to the radio, so you can listen to some of the podcasts. And we are very happy to know that you guys are going to be working with us. So this is kind of the beginning of working with you, and the Popcaks are going to be working with us on a new program called Eucharist Matters. We already have Baptism Matters, so now we are moving forward through the sacraments with Eucharist Matters, and we are very much looking forward to that. And also, you know, in this time, Renew is a nonprofit, so we would love to have you go to our website if you can and support us, so we can bring you more things like this wonderful, wonderful interview today. So
Jennifer,
I think that's
something about our apps. We have an app for families, Praying with Families. That's on our website. I don't know where it is. Jennifer, do you know?
There is a link to the app page, but you can actually find it in the iTunes Store or in Google Play. It's called Pray Together, and then it's the number 2. So that's a wonderful resource that we've got.
Free app, and please visit our bookstore, and we have great resources to help families and individuals and parishes grow in holiness. So thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Greg and Lisa. It's a pleasure, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you with Renew, and we're going to do great things together. God is good. So God bless, and thank you all.
Thanks for letting us be part of it. God bless you guys.
God bless.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.